Good morning to you all, folks, and welcome to this live broadcast. Today we're going to look at economic growth and development. This is chapter 9 in Mind the Gap, and in our normal language, in the textbooks that we use, it's module 3, unit 1, economic growth and development. So what we're going to look at today, let me just show you on the screen. We're going to look at the following. We're going to discuss the difference between economic development and economic growth. We're going to differentiate between the two concepts, economic growth and economic development. And then secondly, we will be in a position to analyze the causes of economic growth and development. And then thirdly, we will discuss the different models of economic development. And number 4, we will examine the aggregate supply and aggregate demand models of economic growth and development. And then lastly, we'll look at the analysis of how economic development is measured. So these are the aims of our presentation this morning. Let's continue to look at, now let me just say before we continue, questions on this particular subject, you will find them in paper 1. Firstly in question 3 of paper 1, and as well as in question 6. It can be a long question, that will be question 6 in paper 1. And the short questions, you find them in question 3 of paper 1. Right, can we continue now to look at the two concepts and to make them easy for all of you? Right, now these are the materials or the resources that you need in order for you to keep yourself versed or abreast with the concepts. You've got your textbook that you are using. Of course, included to your textbook, it's Mind the Gap, which is our study guide, which was provided by the Department of Education and Training. And then we also have, you can also get information from magazines, from internet, from newspapers, and many other economic literature. You will find these two concepts, economic development and economic growth. Okay, let's continue to look at this exercise here as our starter. We have a kind of a cartoon here. As you can see, it's written, the first written word, movable type, mass publication, email, Twitter, tweet. Now, this is really a great development that's now in the box. Discuss whether we are going forward or backward, or are we standing still. This is just an introduction or an icebreaker into the subject, economic growth and development. When we talk about development, what's the latest development? When a person asks you, what's the latest development on the South African economy, these are terms that we use loosely or colloquially in our daily language. But now today, we are going to explore these two words, economic growth and development, from an economic point of view. Now, let's continue to explore the word. In this lesson, again, we're just going to revise a little bit of our grade 11 work on economic growth and development. Remember, we did this in grade 11. We examined in detail in this lesson the demand and the supply side that causes economic growth and development. We are also going to look at that in today's lesson. We are going to look at the two policies, the demand side policy and the supply side policy that causes economic growth and development. We will also look at economic and social indicators of development. And this is an overview of what we will discuss in this presentation. As you can see, the yellow box there shows the difference between economic growth and development. Economic growth there, we say it's an increase in the productive capacity of the economy. I'm sure we all know that now. economic development, we said it's an improvement in the living standards of people in a country. This is what we have covered in grade 11. And then the means to show economic growth in the green box there, the causes of economic growth and development. These are the fathers, or these are the advocates of these two concepts. We all remember Adam Smith. This is the guy who came up with the concept division of labor. And we also have Rostow, who coined this concept investment and capital formation that we are so well versed with now. And then the change from a traditional economy to a modern economy, we look briefly at that. Traditional economy, what is a traditional economy, what is a modern economy? And when we talk about development in a modern economy, because we're living in a modern economy, what is expected in terms of development, we look at that. And then we'll also look at aggregate demand or aggregate supply, as we're going to look at the factors of those two, aggregate supply, aggregate demand side factors. We're going to look at those. And then ultimately this will lead to the measurement of development. I would like to continue to look at the difference between economic growth and development. Now, we go into details now. When we talk about economic development, we're actually looking at the progress that the economy has made, or the qualitative measure of this progress. Remember, there's a difference between quality and quantity. Now, when we talk about economic development, that is where we're referring to quality. Right, economic development, it refers to the adoption of new technology. When we introduce a new method of doing things, that's a development. Transition from agriculture-based to industry-based economy, that's also a development that we have experienced in our economy. So we can say that even though our South African economy is classified as a developing economy, there are some developments that we have made as far as our structure of the economy is concerned, because we are no longer an agriculture-based kind of an economy. We are an industry-based kind of an economy. And in general, when we talk about economic development, we're also looking at the living standards of the population in the country. When the population's living standard increases, then that is development. I mean, if we look at it in a situation where people live in shacks, if the government build houses, RDP houses for such people, and move them from shacks to houses, that's a development, you know. So we can look at it from many perspectives, from many point of view. But something that is concerned with an improvement in the way people do things, in the way people used to live, that's a development. Now, what about economic growth? Economic growth, as you can see in the slide here, it refers to the increase in the capacity of the economy to produce more goods and services over time. Meaning, we will be comparing the production of goods and services in the economy now and previously. If we realize an increase from the previous period to now, if there's an increase in the production of goods and services in the economy over time, then we refer to that as an economic growth. Or we can also say that it's an increase in economic activity over time. I mean, production, it's an economic activity. As long as we increase the volume of the goods and services that we produce over time, then that is economic growth. Now, when we talk about the living standards we will refer to things such as the financial health of a population. That can be measured by the per capita income. What is the per capita income? The per capita income would refer to the income of the country divided by the population number of the country. That will give you the per capita income. And as well as the consumption of goods and services by individual and household. So in order for us to measure these living standards, we need to look at the per capita income, we need to look at the consumption of goods and services by the household and by the individual within those households. Let's continue to explore this matter further. The definition of economic growth, we have already said that it is an increase in the capacity of the economy to produce a higher volume of goods and services over time. Or, like we said, it's an increase in the economic activity over time. Now, let's look at the measurement of economic growth. I'm sure we can agree now that when we talk about economic growth can be measured in figures. We can use figures to measure economic growth. So the measurement of economic growth, there are a number of different ways to measure economic growth. The most common are as follows. Firstly, we use the GDP at current prices to measure economic growth. If there's an increase in the GDP at current prices, then we can confidently say that economic growth has taken place in the economy. Now, the word current prices there, you still remember the difference between current prices and constant prices. When we talk about current prices, these are prices which have not taken into consideration the effect of inflation. That's current prices. And constant prices are prices that have been adjusted according to the price changes. In other words, it means when we take out the effect of inflation from the current prices, we are left with the constant prices. So that's the difference between current prices and constant prices. So that is one of the measures that we can use to measure economic growth. Secondly, we can use the GDP at real prices. Now, another word for constant prices is real prices. What are real prices? They are constant prices. They are current prices which have been adjusted for price changes. Then we call them real prices or constant prices. So when we use the GDP at constant prices or real prices, we can also use that to measure our economic growth. So we are explaining here in bullet 2 there that the real prices are prices that have taken into consideration inflation. So we use of a base year in order for us to calculate the real prices. We need to have a base year. If we want to calculate the real GDP of South Africa in the year 2015, and we need to have our base year. If, for instance, we take, just as an example, 2005 as our base year, then it means we will be comparing the price changes of this year and the price changes of 2005. We call 2005 our base year so that we will be able to calculate our real prices. So that is another way that we can use to calculate the economic growth. And then thirdly, we can also use income per capita. I've already explained what income per capita is when you divide the GDP of the country by the population number, you get the income per capita. Then the fourth way or the fourth method that you can use to measure economic growth is rates. You know, we express our economic growth in terms of percentage increases. South Africa, as we know, we've always targeted our economy to grow at about 4 to 5%. Now, that's the rate at which the country would like the economy to grow. At 5%, and we know that the history shows that we have not really achieved that target of 5%. We've always been below 4% in terms of our economic growth. So we can use rates of the GDP growth in order to calculate the GDP, the economic growth, which is the GDP, which is the increase in the GDP basically. And we look at that percentage over an annual basis. Right. Now, in our next slide, we're going to look at a graphic representation of economic growth. Usually, an arithmetical scale is used as well, and then diagrammatic representation of the aggregate demand and aggregate supply diagrams, as well as the production possibility frontier, in order to further explain this concept and make it more easy. Now, here we have the short-term economic growth. In our analysis here, we will use these two diagrammatic models. Model A will be the one on my left hand side, on your left hand side also, and then that model A, it shows the trend growth, and then the model B, which is on the right hand side, it's your normal production possibility frontier, production possibility curve that you've done in grade 11. Now let's quickly look at this here. Let's briefly explain this quickly. There is our production possibility curve. You remember the production possibility curve where we have the capital goods and the consumer goods that are produced by a country, and it's a combination of those two products. So this production possibility curve or frontier, it shows the maximum output combination using existing resources and technology in the most efficient way. Now, any point along or inside the curve itself, it shows that there is an underutilization of resources. For example, I'm now referring to the graph, the diagram on the right, on your right, which is the production possibility curve. So we've said that any point that is inside the curve itself, like point A, you see where point A is. Point A is just below the curve. So if this economy is producing at point A, then we can say that this country is underutilizing its resources. And we can safely say in economic terms, there's an inefficiency in this case, because we know that the capacity of this economy is to produce along the line, along the production possibility curve. But as long as it gets below the production possibility curve there, then it becomes inefficiency. Right, and then let's continue. In diagram A, we've said that the diagram on your left, it shows the trend and actual growth over time, where an output gap is shown on the diagram. So the economy is experiencing a collective unemployment and lower output than expected. Now, the movement towards the boundary, where there is a positive output gap, would show the economy is operating at full employment and the use of resources is maximized. Let's just go back there again. You can see the negative output gap there. It is the gap just below the trend line. You see where the trend line is? If you remember the business cycle, that straight diagonal line is known as the trend line. Now, where the economy shows the negative output gap, the economy actually produces less than the trend growth. And then just below the red line there, you have the positive output gap, where the economy shows where the economy produces more than the trend line. That's a positive output. And then as we go down up the trend line there, we have now the trend growth, which shows the general growth over time. And then where the cycle turns, that's the actual growth. So this is what we mean when we say where the economy is showing the positive output gap, then the economy is operating at full employment, and the resources are utilized efficiently, which means there is no wastage of resources. Unlike when the economy produces at a negative output, then that is where the economy is experiencing unemployment, and there is also the low output, and the resources are not utilized efficiently, which means there's a wastage of resources. So that's the explanation of that. I was just trying to indicate to you what are some of the possible causes of this economic growth. Now let's look at the second model. Now here we're going to look at economic growth from the aggregate demand, aggregate supply point of view. Now there are two possible means of analyzing this economic growth. Firstly, we can look at the short term, where we use the aggregate supply, aggregate demand diagram that show the short-term changes. And then secondly, we can look at it from the point of view of the long term, where we also use the aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Now, on your left-hand side, you have your aggregate supply and aggregate demand curves on a short-term basis. And on your right-hand side, that would be on the long-term basis. Now, look at the aggregate supply. The aggregate supply from AD1, AD, and AD2. That's the short term. That's how it can change over the short term. Now, let's explain it further here. Now, we all know that in the short term, when we would like to make a change to this, to economic growth, when we would like to effect change to the GDP, because when we measure the economic growth, we need to look at the increase in the GDP. Now, remember, you can all remember the equation that we use to calculate the GDP. The GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. X there stands for exports and M there stands for imports. Your C there stands for your final consumption by the household. Your I there stands for your gross fixed capital formation by business, which is the investment spending by businesses. And your G there stands for expenditure by your government. So this is the equation that we use to measure the GDP, which is also used to measure the aggregate demand. Now, any increase, if we would like to have an economic growth in our economy, then it means we need to increase our GDP. And in order for us to increase our aggregate demand or our GDP, we can only achieve that if we increase any of the factors in this equation. Whether it's a C that we increase, or it's an I that we increase, or a G that we increase, or the net export. The net export in this case would be the export minus the imports, would give us the net export. So if we increase any of the factors here, then we will be able to realize our economic growth. Secondly, if we use this method here, AD is equal to C plus I plus G plus your net export in order to increase the economic growth, we will have a challenge there. If we increase any of those items, C, I, G, or the net export, then our challenge would be we might experience inflation in the economy. I'm sure we all know that. As the economy operates at an upturn, there will be this inflation coming into play. Now, the authorities can guard against increased inflation by increasing the interest rate to prevent the economy from overheating. So when that is the case, if we experience this inflation when the economy is growing, we all want the economy to grow, but a growing economy brings with it an increased inflation. Now, this is where the government will have to come in. The government will come in terms of the monetary authority, which is the South African Reserve Bank. They will come in and increase the interest rate in order to prevent the economy from overheating. In other words, so that can happen in the short term. Now, in the long term, let's look at the analysis of economic growth in the long term. Now, economic growth generally comes about in the long term when there is a change in the supply side and the country's productive potential is increased. Now, this is where we're looking at the supply side of the economy. Over a long period of time, when there is a change in the supply side in the economy, when there is an increase in the productive capacity of the economy, and we are actually producing more, then we can experience economic growth in the long term. So that's the difference between the short term and the long term. In the short term, remember, it's when we increase any of the components of the aggregates demand, which is the expenditure by the household, investment by the businesses, or sometimes we refer to it as capital formation, or when we increase the government expenditure, or when we import more than we export, when we export more than we import. If we increase any of those items, then we can experience economic growth in the short term. Okay, now let's continue now. Causes of economic growth and development. Economists have over time developed many different ideas as to what causes economic growth and development. One of the fathers of economics, Adam Smith, he is of the view that the main cause was the division of labor and the freedom given to entrepreneurs to develop new technology and businesses in England. Adam Smith was an English economist, so that's how he thought about economic growth. He said the main cause would be the division of labor, and if you couple that with the freedom that you give to the entrepreneurs to develop, to become innovative, and then that will lead to economic growth. And then we've got the Rostow model, or Rostow's idea. This one argues that the development takes place as a result of saving and investment. Whereas according to Adam Smith, there needs to be a division of labor, and there needs to be a freedom that is given to the entrepreneurs to develop, to come up with new ways of producing. Then that will lead to development. And then the modernists, those who believe in modern economy, they believe that a transformation from the self-sufficient kind of an economy to modern manufacturing economy must take place before we can achieve growth. Now, let me also emphasize here, when you differentiate between economic growth and development, it is a well-known fact that a country cannot achieve economic development before it achieves growth. We must first achieve economic growth before we can achieve development. That's a standing fact. And then let's go back to our notes again. The aggregate demand, or aggregate supply economists, you know, these are the economists who believe that growth and development is caused by aggregate demand side factors and aggregate supply side factors. They look at the supply side. They also look at the demand side of the economy in order to explain growth and development in the economy. Now let's continue to look at the Rostow model. Look at this diagram here, according to Rostow, who says development occurs in different stages. And development is a very slow process. For America to be where it is now, it has taken America a very long period to become a developed economy. Not only America, many other Western countries, Germany, UK, it has taken them a very long period of time before they are where they are now. And they are now referred to as developed countries or first world countries. Now, according to Rostow's model, it takes a period of time. Development in the Western countries started in the year 1750. The first stage there was the pre-industrial stage, where the society depended on agriculture. And then from there, it moved to the second stage, where development took off. There was a lot of investment in the economy of about 5 to 10% of the GDP, and that increased the capital formation. And then that activity took off most of those economies from the pre-industrial stage to the second stage. And then from the second stage, the third stage would be the period of sustained economic growth, which means these countries, when they were in a transition period, and in stage 3, they experienced a sustained economic growth. Savings and investment of about 5% to 10%. There was an increased division of labor and capital. As you can see in the pictures here, the graph goes upward. And stage 4, there was now a drive to maturity. The economies of these countries were now reaching maturity. There was an increased economic growth due to increased production and consumption. As that occurs in the economy continues to increase and to develop. And stage 4, it was a stage of age of high mass production and consumption, where the economies continue to grow again, and the citizens of those countries enjoyed a high standard of living. This is now the period after the 1900s, especially after 1950. These economies are now are now known as wealthy economies, rich economies, because they've gone through the stages. So this proves the fact that a country cannot be developed over a period of 10 years. I know that in South Africa we expect miracles. We expect by now we should be a developed country, or we are expecting our country to become a developed country. But one thing that we fail to realize is that it takes a very long period of time for a country to become developed. So we need to be patient. We need to exercise patience in this case, because there are things that we are doing right now. Okay, let's continue again. In a traditional society where the values of the society were not conducive to hard work, saving and investment, technology, use of traditional labor methods, as you can see in the picture there, the society, the economy is more self-sufficient, you know, and then changes occur. I'm now in the middle column. Changes occurred in ways of thinking and doing things. We use modern scientific thinking, use of new machinery. Then in the agricultural sector, things change. We change from a traditional, a self-sufficient agricultural stage, where production was done for self, was done for the self-fulfillment. But now in a modern kind of an economy, this agriculture is now more commercialized. As you can see in the picture there, that's a commercialized agriculture. We don't do things for our own. We're doing it also for the markets. And then in terms of transport, the traditional society, you can look at the type of transport that they use there. But because of now urbanization, we're now using the modern types of transport. As you can see, our roads are also of the modern type of infrastructure. We're using buses, we're using trains, we're using taxis, etc. Communication in a traditional society, this is how it used to happen. You know, now in a modern economy, we have cell phones, we've got internet, we've got electronic communication in many different forms. Industrial production, in the traditional society, you can see how production took place there. In our modern society, we've got big machinery. A lot of capital is being used in order to produce goods and services. We have become a more capital-intensive kind of a producing nation. So that's just the difference to show you. If we talk about development, it's when we move from a traditional society to a modern developed society, you know. Right. This is just as a way of taking a break here. As you can see, this cartoon of ours, I'm going to spend about 1 billion rand on bones, and that will create employment for others. And then the intention of good results, somewhat uncertain. Discuss to what extent the statement is true concerning a government stimulating aggregate demand by spending. All macro will do is it will cause inflation, and the rand will be devalued. Assess the validity of this claim. You can do this on your own. You can look at how do we stimulate our aggregate demand by spending, and you can also look at if we spend more, that will cause inflation in the economy, and the rand will be devalued. You can look at that and discuss it with your friends, and then confirm with your teacher. Right, now can we continue to look at right, the next. Now, this is now where we're exploring further to look at both the supply side causes and the demand side causes of economic development. Now, according to these economists who believe in the supply side factors and the demand side factors, they believe that economic growth and development depend upon the supply side factors and the demand side factors. Now, as the diagram here below shows, it gives us an overview of these factors that actually are involved here. The factors causing long-term economic growth and development. Let's look at this. I don't know whether this is yellow or orange, but this is the block that contains the supply side factors. Now, those supply side factors are the following: the nature and quality of human resources, the natural resources, both the quantity and the quality, capital formation, increased savings and investment, entrepreneurship, improved management. These are the factors from the supply side of the economy. And the blue block there shows the causes, the demand side causes or the demand side factors that can lead to economic growth and development. Stimulating growth by government through monetary and fiscal policy or means. Secondly, using free trade policies. Thirdly, using free market policies. And fourthly, increased consumer demand. Now, this is just in summary, an overview of those supply side causes and the demand side causes. Now, let's explore them further. Let's first start with the supply side factors. Now, factors affecting the supply side of economic growth. Remember, from the supply side, if you remember your diagram of supply and demand, so we'll be concentrating on the supply, where the producers are the ones who supply the goods and the services. Now, let's look at the first one, the nature and quantity of the factors of production. You all remember the factors of production. They remain the same. It is land or natural resources in some literature. Labor is another factor of production. Capital is another one. Entrepreneurship is another one. Now, land. South Africa has many natural resources. We all know that. We have many natural resources. We know that we are a mineral resource-based country. We've got a lot of mineral resources. Some of them have not yet been mined already. And secondly, labor, the number of workers in a country. We're looking at whether the workforce of the country is skilled or it's unskilled. Are they well educated? Do they have the skills? We're looking at that. And then capital, increased capital investment. How much more as a country do we spend on capital equipment? Because it is a known fact that capital equipment can actually increase the production of goods and services. So we're looking at how much do we spend on capital investment, or at what rate is our capital formation taking place. This will depend upon the rate of return. People are only prepared to invest when they know that the return on investment would be high. But if the return on investment is low, then people will not invest. And we know that the interest rate also influences the return on investment. If the interest rate is high, so that's one side about the interest rate. It can also encourage capital investment. Then number 4, another factor of production, the entrepreneurship. Do we have good entrepreneurs in our country? Are we better utilizing these entrepreneurial skills that we have in our country? And is there coordination of the factors of production? Of course, we need the skill. This is the skill that the entrepreneurs need to possess, because they are the ones who are innovators, they are the organizers, they are the one who organizes all the other factors of production. So we're looking at how do they coordinate the other factors of production. This is where we're looking at the management of businesses in the country. We know that can also lead to economic growth, right? So we need skilled entrepreneurs, skilled managers, so that they can help to coordinate other factors of production for us to experience economic growth. And we know that economic growth will ultimately lead to economic development. Now, secondly, the second supply side factor there, it's an increase in productivity. What is productivity? Productivity is now the relationship between the output and the input. We know we have labor productivity and capital productivity. Now, due to better education, do we experience productivity because our workforce has been better educated or it's better skilled? Is our technology of the right standard? Because technology needs to bring an improvement in the way we do things. If that is the case, then we will achieve a higher productivity, an increase in productivity. Number 3, the advances in technology. The new products to be made or existing products to be produced with fewer resources. In order for us to be efficient, we need to maintain our output, but we need to reduce our cost. If we can do that with the technology that we have or with the fewer resources that we have, then we will be able to increase our economic growth as well as our productivity. So these are the supply side factors that influences economic growth. Natural resources, again, as you can see in the pictures there, mineral resources that we have in a country, gold, platinum, these are base metal as well as coal. These raw materials can easily be exploited and exported. And then secondly there we've got vegetation and wildlife. As you can see the picture number 3 there, the giraffe as well as other games there. There is a great diversity of wildlife in South Africa as well as vegetation. And the coastline as shown in the middle picture there, it's a very beautiful scenic coastline which is ideal for tourism because we need to have an increase in these economic activities in order for us to achieve economic growth. Location, its geographical location makes it closer to European markets than its competitors such as Australia. Are we closer to the European markets? Are we closer to the American markets? Are we closer to the Australian markets? Because the geographic location of a country also has a bearing on whether the country can increase its trade with other countries so that its net export increases. As a result, the GDP will also increase. So these are the natural resources. Human resources, economic growth also depends upon the quality and the size of the labor force. So that labor may be productive. In order to have our labor force to be productive, we need to look at the quality as well as the size of our labor force. The following can be done to improve the quality and in order to improve the quality of our labor force. We can improve the education and training so that our labor can be more productive, which means we need to take education and training very seriously in our different work environments. We need to introduce reskilling, skills development so that we better equip our employees to become more productive at a place of employment. Secondly, we can improve the quality of our health services. If our workers are well taken care of, then they will become productive. If we give them everything that they need, if we give them the leave for them to take care of their health, then they will become productive. So we need to increase our health care. But now, if they go to our health centers, they need to find our health centers delivering quality health care services. If they are not delivering quality health care services, then it would be a futile exercise in order for us to. That's why some of the big corporations, they actually take care of the health of their workers by establishing private clinics in their work environment so that they should not have their workers taking a lot of days absent from work because of ill health. Thirdly, they're limiting the power and influence of trade unions. A productive employee it's an employee who is motivated, who works in an environment that is not really discouraging or that is not influencing them negatively. So trade unions play a very, very important role. The more powerful the union is, the more influence they will have at a work environment. So we need to limit the power of the unions, because this is a debate in our country. Unions are so powerful to an extent that they actually influence the productivity in the country. Now, if we limit, if you are a business and you want to employ workers, if you think about them joining unions and the union disturbing the production process, you'll think twice. That's why most of our private sector do not want to employ. And they do have the capacity to employ people in order to reduce the level of unemployment. But they would present this argument that our labor laws are very rigid. They favor the unions more than the employers. So maybe we need to look at that. But I know our South African government is on the verge of reviewing the laws. So in South Africa, the quality of public education and health services it's not of a good standard. We know our public healthcare system is not of a good standard. The trade unions in South Africa are very powerful. They often go on strike. We've got a striking season, and when that happens, it actually disrupts the production process through strikes, and the labor unrest often occurs. If you remember what happened in Marikana, the AMCU strike, it was a very prolonged strike that actually impacted negatively on the entire economy of South Africa. Then entrepreneurship. These are some of our famous entrepreneurs in the Rupert family. Anton Rupert, remember, the founder of the Rembrandt Group, and Raymond Ackerman, the founder of Pick n Pay. Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa is a lawyer by profession and an entrepreneur. He's now the deputy president of the country. So when an entrepreneur starts a new business, he contributes to the economic development of the local community, as shown in the next slide. So economic growth occurs, the income will increase, the living standards of people will improve, there will be better investment opportunities that will arise, the tax base for the government will also be enlarged, there will be a greater number of new enterprises that the government can tax. That's what we mean when we say the tax base is enlarged. And then there will be technological developments that will occur, and there will be job opportunities. So people will get employed when we've got this, when we develop this very important factor of production. So the case for encouraging entrepreneurship is presented on the next slide. Let's look at it. When we've got entrepreneurs who start a new business, there will be more jobs that are created for the local community, and there will be an increased income, and the spending will increase in the local community, which means the economy of that local community will grow, and the money spent on the material goods, the retailers, the businesses in that community will also benefit. And therefore, there will be increased taxes. The government can now tax more businesses than before, and because so that the government can now provide more and better services for the public. So this is what can happen when we've got more entrepreneurs entering the market. So we'll have an increased standard of living for the community when this has got a ripple effect or a multiplier effect. This is the multiplier effect of just one entrepreneur can lead to so many positive spin-offs in the economy or spillovers in the economy. More jobs will be created. There will be an increase in income. There will be more benefits for businesses. The government will also benefit in terms of taxes, and the quality of life for most people will increase. Let's continue to look at capital formation, which is another supply side factor. Capital formation is very important for a country to grow and to develop. So capital can be increased in a number of different ways. In order for us to increase our capital, we need to increase our savings. If we encourage our consumers to save, those savings will then be taken and be converted to investment, because business will now borrow that money from the financial institutions. That money, it's accumulated savings by household. Business will require that money, and they will use that money they will spend it on capital equipment. So the problem is that the rate of investment, the rate of savings in South Africa, it's very, very low. Most South Africans, they live beyond their means. That's why many of them have got so many debts. So we still have got a lot to do as far as the rate of savings concerned in South Africa. I know the government, it's still it's a headache for the government. They're still thinking of ways of how to encourage the South African public to save more. Secondly, we can also increase the stock of capital. We can also increase capital when when the government increased taxes. Increased taxes by government, which can be spent on capital formation. If the government increases the taxes, like it is expected today that the government might increase the taxes in their budget today. Remember, today is the budget day. The Minister of Finance will be tabling his budget in Parliament this afternoon. So economists expect the government to increase the taxes today. So when the government increases these taxes, it will be for the reason that the government can spend more on capital investment. Remember, the bulk of the government spending goes to the current, it's current expenditure, but less of it goes to capital expenditure. So the problem in our country is that there is less than 20% of the country's budget is spent on improving and retaining existing infrastructure. So which means, that's what I'm saying, a lot of our budget goes to current expenditure, not capital expenditure, because even the capital that we have, we need to maintain and to improve it. So if it is less than 20%, you can imagine that we would not be growing at the rate at which we expect. If we want to grow at 5%, then as long as we spend more money on current expenditure, on social grants and social services, then we will not achieve the economic growth that we expect. Bullet number three, increased overseas investment. We also need that, increased overseas investment. We need more of foreign direct investment in our country in order for us to increase our investment. But given the labor unrest in our country and the threats of nationalization, as was pronounced by the ANC Youth League a few years ago, that can have a negative effect of deterring the foreign investment in our country, because there's a lot of uncertainties whether the government support this nationalization or whether in this industry there will be labor unrest or there will be strikes. Those are threats to foreign direct investment. We need to keep our economy stable so that we can attract a lot of those foreign capital investment in our country. And bullet number 4 there, to encourage small and medium business enterprises, the so-called SMMEs. And we all know that the government, South African government, is very serious on SMMEs. That's why they have created a special ministry of small and medium enterprise development. That ministry, it's headed by Minister Lindiwe Zulu. She's the Minister of Small Business Development. So that's how serious the government is. So because they value the contribution that can be made by the small business development. They can employ, they can help the economy to grow, they can help to improve the standard of living in local communities. That's what we need also. Right, now the government supply side policies. The government can promote economic growth and development by adopting the following in respect of the supply side policy. This is now the South African government. This is what they can do. Firstly, they can reduce the taxes. If the government reduces the taxes, we know what will happen. It means there will be more money in the pockets of the consumers. They can spend more. And when they spend more, the aggregate demand will increase. Secondly, they can promote the free market competition by means of anti-monopoly legislation. In module module 2, under dynamics of the markets, we've talked about the competition policies in South Africa. The Competition Act in South Africa, it's a legislation that was promulgated by the South African government in order to encourage competition and to discourage monopolies and to discourage anti-competitive laws or anti-competitive practices. So that's what the government would like to see. They would like to see free market competition, businesses competing against each other. When that is the case, the consumer is the one who's going to benefit. There won't be a business that charges more than an abnormal price. We need that competition in the economy. That's why the government promotes free competition in the economy. Thirdly, this is what the government can do, the South African government can do. They can restrict the ability of trade unions to influence market conditions. They've got the power as the government to curb the influence of the trade unions. And the power that the government has is a legislative power. So they can just make some amendments to the labor laws in order to restrict the ability of trade unions to influence the market condition. Fourthly, they can increase the labor mobility by improving education and training. We know that our labor is highly immobile. Our labor cannot immediately move to where there are better opportunities. In order to make our labor to become more mobile or to move with immediate effect is to improve the education and the training of our labor force. Is actually to improve the quality of our labor. If we can do that, then our labor's mobility will be improved. The next point there that the government can do is they can subsidize the new green technology. We've got this new concept that is known as the green economy, where we're trying to do things in a way that is not damaging or it's not harming the environment. We call that the green economy. So green technology is the same, is the technology that does not really harm the environment. If there's an initiative of technology that does not hamper the environment, then the government can encourage such technology. We've got green buildings now. We've got alternative methods of generating electricity besides using coal that are environmentally friendly. Those are kinds of initiatives that the government needs to subsidize. The next point there, the government can improve economic stability by promoting investment. The government must also not just promote investment among the public sector, amongst the private sector. They must also show, but must also lead by example by increasing their expenditure on capital investment. So the government can do that, can improve, can promote economic growth by improving economic stability to promote investment. Right, now the table on the next slide shows how government can achieve macroeconomic objectives. Remember the macroeconomic objectives: economic growth, full employment, stable prices, stable exchange rate. Now, the policy that the government can use here, in this case, if the government wants to achieve economic growth, the government can use the following policy instrument. They can use the monetary policy. When they use the monetary policy, they look at the interest rate. I'm sorry for that mistake there. Monetary policy, what should come under monetary policy is interest rate. But taxation expenditure must come under fiscal policy. That's number 2. You can correct that. Monetary policy is interest rate. Fiscal policy is taxation and expenditure. So these are the 2 policies that the government can use. They can use the monetary policy. They can also use the fiscal policy. The monetary policy is the one that is implemented by the South African Reserve Bank by increasing or decreasing the interest rate if they want to achieve economic growth. And the fiscal policy, it's the one that is implemented by the Department of Finance or the Treasury. They can increase or decrease the taxes. They can increase or decrease the government expenditure. The macroeconomic indicators for that, it will be the GDP. We'll see the effects on the GDP. We'll see the effects on the real growth rate. We'll see the effects on the income per capita. We'll see the effects on the government's budget in terms of the percentage of the GDP. We'll also see the effects of that on the rate of interest. Secondly, when the objective is full employment, mean full utilization of factors of production. That's what we mean by full employment, full utilization of factors of production. The instruments that the government can use there: monetary policy, supply side policy, or economic plan. The effects we'll see, they will be shown by the indicator, the government's budget, also by unemployment levels, as well as the benefits. And then if the objective is to achieve stable prices, the policies that the government can use there is monetary policy or fiscal policy. Remember, monetary policy is when we manipulate the interest rate, or the fiscal policy where we make an interplay between taxation and expenditure. What are the indicators? The indicators that will indicate whether the government has succeeded. There will be a change in the PPI. PPI stands for Producer Price Index, as well as the CPI, Consumer Price Index. We'll see the effect there if the government has succeeded. When the aim is the objective is to achieve the stable balance of payment or the stable exchange rate, the policy instrument that the government can use is monetary policy or the fiscal policy. We will notice the change when there is a surplus or a deficit on the current account of the balance of payment, or when the exchange rate is stable. Then we say that the government has achieved its macroeconomic objective. Now let's move on. Measures of economic development. Economic indicators. There are a number of economic indicators that we can use to look at the development in a country. Firstly, we can look at the GNP per capita. The GNP stands for Gross National Product per capita. That is the dollar value of a country's final output of goods and services in a year, divided by its population, right? When we've got the gross national product and we divide it by the population number, we will get our GNP per capita. This GNP per capita, it reflects the average income of a country's citizen. On average, each citizen, according to this example, countries with a GNP per capita in 1998 of about $9,361 or more, those countries are described as high-income countries. And those who receive between $761 and $9,360, it is classified under middle income. And those receiving $760 or less are classified as low income. So this is what we mean by the GNP per capita. It's a good indicator of whether the economy has moved upward or has moved backward. Right. If a country moves forward, then which means it moves from one level of development to another. Either it moves from a low income to middle income, or from middle income to high income. Now, if it moves from high income to middle income, then that's not development. That's a regression. But moving from low income to middle income, that's a progression. And that's what we need, and that's what we mean by economic development. Then economic productivity and growth. Let's look at another indicator, economic productivity and growth. The low and middle income countries, they produce about 20% of the world's goods and services, but they have more than 80% of world's population. That is not good. They only produce 20% of the world's goods and services, but there's 80% of the world's population that reside in those countries. And those would be countries that are known as third world countries or developing countries. Okay, let's continue now. Measures of economic development, social indicators. The following table shows the main indicators used by developmental agencies. Now, when we talk about developmental agencies, World Bank is one of the developmental agencies. IMF is one of the developmental agencies. United Nations is one of the developmental agencies. Now, these are, in general, some of the indicators, social indicators, which are used by developmental agencies. First column, we've got measures of development. Second column, method of measurement. The last column, possible interpretation. Now let's look at the first one, infant mortality. This is all about development, economic development. Infant mortality, this is the number of children who die between birth and the age of 5. An indication of the living standard and the state of medical services in a country. That's what it means. If we've got a high number of infant mortality, then it means in that country the state of medical health is very poor. Right. And then the second one is life expectancy at birth. What that means is how long a person is expected to live when he or she is born. An indicator there, or an interpretation, depending on the figure, whether it's high or low, it will give us an indication of the living standard, and that again it will tell us whether the state of health care in that country is good or poor. Obviously, when the life expectancy is low, it says a lot about the state of the medical health in that country. It means it's not good, it's very poor. And then we look at the third one, population growth rate. This is given as a percentage. Now, we say normally the population can grow at about anything from 0.5% to 2%. That is acceptable, as long as the population growth is not faster than economic growth. Then if the population growth rate is faster than economic growth, then we've got a problem. So an indication there, again, it indicates the quality of life. If, for instance, the population grows at 1.5% and the economy grows, the economic growth rate is about 2%, then it means this country is actually achieving real growth rate of the economy, because the population growth rate is lower than the economic growth rate. And then the people per doctor, the number of people for each medical doctor, that is also an indicator. If I read somewhere that in the Free State you've got 1 doctor per 1,000 patients. That's a problem. It tells us again about the state of medical healthcare in the province, that it is not good. We need to reduce that number of people per doctor. It cannot be 1,000. Literacy level. Okay, firstly, before literacy level, percentage of percentage of children in school. The percentage of children in school, the percentage of children who attend school. If that increases, then it means it's positive. It means our state of education is better. But if the percentage of children in school is low, then it means our state of education it's not in good condition. It's actually in quagmire when the percentage of children in school is low. The literacy level, that's the number of people who are able to read and write as well as to calculate, right? This has a reflection on the state of education again. If we still have, a literacy level of below 80%, then we have a problem. But I know the literacy level in South Africa is above 90%. Most people can read and write and compute and calculate. And then the percentage of people with safe water, that's a very important indicator. It's a percentage of total population who have got access to safe and clean drinking water, not just waters from the river that is uncleaned. This has got an impact on the living standards of people also. We know there are some communities in the country who still do not have safe, clean drinking water, and we see their protest on TV almost daily. And the government is working very hard to try to remedy the situation. Now let's look at the demand side policies, and then we will look at the other policies of the South African government. The demand side policies, so far we have looked at the supply side policies in detail. Now we are going to look at the demand side policy in detail. The following factors create a link between growth and development. Now, funds from the savings resulting from growth are needed to bring about structural changes to the economy. This in turn results in development. An increase in savings will result in greater investment and consequently in growth. We know about that. We've spoke about that, that we need to have more savings. If we have got more savings will lead to more investment. More investment will lead to more employment, will lead to more economic activities, more income, more spending. The second bullet, the investments such as household savings is required to allow people to develop themselves. Increasing people's ability to spend and increased spending itself is necessary to bring about economic growth. Growth in the economy's ability to produce is needed for the creation of employment. This will lead to an increase in the population's income levels, and it will help with the provision of basic services such as electricity, clean water, and housing. An increase in productivity is determined by capital as well as labor efficiency. This is a repetition of what I have already explained. Now, this is one of the development agencies, the United Nations. They use what we call the Human Development Index. The Human Development Index, it creates a single statistic which was to serve as a frame of reference for both social and economic development. The following diagram gives us an idea of components involved with this measurement, the Human Development Index. If the United Nations uses the Human Development Index, they are looking at the following things: health, education, income. That's a three-dimension kind of indicator. And with health, you'll be looking at the life expectancy at birth, as we have explained it already. And the education, will be looking at the mean years of schooling, expected years of schooling. We will be looking at that also. That's what the United Nations is looking at in order to tell whether the country can be classified as a developed or a developing country, or a higher income, a middle income, or a lower income country. And then the income, that's where we're looking at the gross national income per capita. So there you've got 4 indicators there under human development. So this is what Human Development Index entail: the health, education, income, as well as those sub-indicators: life expectancy at birth, the years of schooling, expected years of schooling, the gross national income per capita. So this is according to the United Nations, the Human Development. It's a very, very important indicator. The levels of development, you have seen this in grade 11 when you were doing developing countries. Social scientists and economists, they use various measures of development that have been identified. The United Nations classifies countries into 4 distinct groups using the Human Development Index. Countries can be classified as very high Human Development Index. Those are countries that consist mainly of countries in North America, Canada, the United States of America, as well as many European countries that are members of the European Union. They are very high. They have very high Human Development Index. And then secondly, high human development. Example of this group of nations would include Cuba, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and Tunisia. Tunisia is the highest ranked African country in the Human Development Index. And then you've got your medium Human Development Index. Example of this group of nations include Botswana and South Africa. We are in the same category. We are in the medium Human Development Index. And in the low Human Development Index, will be countries such as Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. These are countries that are struggling with many, many challenges. Normally, they would be the developing or third world countries. Right? This is what we have looked at so far: economic growth, the increase in the capacity of the economy to produce more goods and services over time, economic development, the progress that the economy has made over time, and it has resulted in a better living standards or an improvement in the living standards of people. We have looked at the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model of economic growth. The aggregate demand side that influence economic growth, aggregate demand, where we've looked at the aggregate demand equals to the C plus I plus G plus X minus M. We've said that a rise in any of those, either the C, the I, the G, or the net export, can lead to a higher AD, or higher GDP, and that will lead to economic growth. We have looked at that also. And under the supply side, we've looked at the following the factors that affect economic growth: the levels of infrastructure, investment in roads, transport, and communication. Human capital, we've looked at human capital in terms of productivity of the workers and what affects them, the size and the quality of the workers, which can be improved through education and training. 3, we have looked at development of technology, which also can help to increase productivity. And an increase in productivity will lead to an increase in economic growth, and which will ultimately lead to a better infrastructure, better quality of life. Political stability, where the government can encourage free trade and free markets and entrepreneurship, and encourage competition among the businesses so that we can increase our economy. And I think now we're going to take a break, and when we come back we will look at the South African context as far as economic growth and development are concerned. Let's take about a 10-minute break. Hi folks, welcome back to this presentation of economic growth and development for grade 12. We're continuing with our subject this morning, economic growth and development, but now we are going to look at the South African approach of economic growth and development policies. Now, as you can see on the screen here, I have evaluation of South African approaches used in South Africa, growth and development policies. Now, let's quickly go through this and see. Under growth, we've got the macroeconomic policies that South Africa have used, and we all know that by now, we all know that these are the macroeconomic objectives that any country, including ours, South Africa, would like to achieve. High economic growth rates, higher levels of employment, price stability, exchange rate stability, or balance of payment stability, as well as number 5, economic equity. Right? We all need to achieve that. And increase economic growth rates, we know that it will lead to more tax revenue for the government, which can be used to provide more goods and services for the citizens of a country. All the above measures should be evaluated in terms of the international benchmark. We'll look at that later now. Under development, these include measures aimed at achieving industrial, agricultural, and human development. The microeconomic initiatives here, it will focus on facilitating increased competition, opening up resource markets, enabling land use and environmental policy. And then secondly, under development, the social care, the social welfare and security and poverty alleviation should be very much part of the policy of development policy in South Africa. Policies to redress the past inequalities, what happened in the past must be addressed now, including employment equity, as well as triple BEE, or broad-based black economic empowerment, affirmative action, that's part of the South African policies to development policy, land redistribution and restitution, where the previous owner of the land are getting their land back. Macroeconomic characteristics, as the standard of living is low, increase the per capita income. Unemployment is high. We create more employment, e.g., by implementing programs such as the public works program or the expanded public works program. The aim is to try to reduce the level of unemployment. And then low productivity. The South African government tries to improve the level of knowledge and skills, as well as to motivate the workforce or the economically active people by implementing programs such as the GIPSA. Right? This is just the timeline to show you which policy was introduced in which year. We've had so many policies in the country. In 1992, we've got this integrated manufacturing strategy. And then later in 1994, when we had our first democratically elected government, they introduced the RDP, the Reconstruction and Development Program. And then later in 1996, another policy came into effect, which was known as the GEAR, or Growth, Employment and Redistribution Strategy. And in 2003, there was another policy that came, the Black Economic Empowerment. And then 2005, we had another one known as GISA. In 2007, there was GIPSA. And in 2012, there was NGP, National Growth Path. And now recently, the latest one, we have the NDP, or the National Development Goal, or National Development Policy, NDP. Now, let's quickly go through them. The first one that was introduced, the RDP. Let me just go back to the RDP. The strategy, this was the strategy that was adopted by the first democratically elected government. The aim of that strategy was to try to alleviate poverty and address the inequalities and shortfalls in social services by focusing on things such as job creation, welfare, housing, transport, land reform, healthcare, education, training, water and sanitation. So the RDP actually identified the basic needs of people, and they tried to meet the basic needs of people. So evaluation thus far, meeting the basic needs of people, the government created an increased demand for goods and services. The expanded public works programs were mostly labor intensive, and it is still the case now. It is still being implemented. A lot of unemployed people get job opportunities, which are not necessarily long-term kind of job opportunities. They are just temporary job opportunities in the expanded public works program. This has helped in order to alleviate unemployment, to reduce the level of unemployment and to alleviate poverty. Right? Some social achievements such as the building of houses. The name RDP houses comes from this program, the RDP. It was a strategy that the government wanted to develop the South African government with. But now those houses, they came to be known as RDP houses. So those houses were built. They were identified as one of the basic needs from the RDP. They're also providing clean water, and the government still continues to provide clean water in communities where there is no safe, clean running water. Electrification. Majority of households in the country have been electrified. There are some of them who are still in the dark. Land reform is still a process that is still going on, and it has got its own challenges. The healthcare system, it is also, the government is also grappling with the improvement of the healthcare system. They've just introduced the national health insurance. We've not had feedback. How far has it succeeded in those pilot centers? The real GDP growth erratic. It has been erratic since 1994. Unemployment in informal sector has increased. Key objectives of poverty reduction and improvement service delivery, they were not necessarily successful. And then the second one, GEAR, growth, employment and redistribution. The main strategy, this was in 1996, was adopted in 1996. It was to strengthen economic development and to redistribute income and create socio-economic opportunities for the poor. Evaluation, let's look at how far has this succeeded. It has got mixed outcomes. it brought greater financial discipline to the South African economy. That's why most economists would say the fundamentals in South Africa are okay, which means there has been quite stability as far as our macroeconomic strategy is concerned, and there's been financial discipline from the government's perspective. Now it seems as if the government is moving away from that discipline because the budget deficit tends to increase recently as compared to the year 1996. The real reduction in fiscal deficit less than 3% in terms of the international benchmark, but now it has gone back above 3% in this current administration. Inflation has dropped mostly to within inflation targets. Remember, our target is between 3 and 6%, so we have managed to keep it within the targets. The foreign exchange reserves increased in most regards. We've had a substantial base of our reserves in the past. There's been a failure to create sustainable job opportunities. We know this economy has shed millions and millions of jobs almost every year. And even recently, the stats prove that there's been a change, but it's a very slight change in the employment level. There's also been a failure to redistribute the wealth more evenly because the gap between the rich and the poor has continued to increase tremendously. So it's still a challenge for this government to continue to close that gap. Now, there was another strategy, as KISA, Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative for South Africa. Remember, some of these policies, they were required in question 6 of paper 1 last year, November 2014. In that question, candidates were asked to discuss the national skills development. They were asked to discuss the national growth path as well as the national development plan. Now, ASGISA was not part of that. Now, with ASGISA, Accelerated Shared Growth Initiative of South Africa, you need to be prepared and you need to know and master these policies in case you get a question like this one, like the one that was on the question paper last year. Our candidates had a problem with this question because they were not really prepared. So you need to prepare everything and be able to answer all the questions. Now, with ASGISA, the key objective was to coordinate government initiatives to create economic development. The key elements there was to have unemployment and poverty by the year 2014. This was, of course, inspired by one of the goals taken from Millennium Development Goals of trying to have poverty and unemployment by the year 2015. So the second one was to accelerate economic growth, to an average of about 6%. We have not yet achieved that. It's still a pipe dream for the country between the year 2010 and 2014. Hopefully, one of the years, I don't know when, we will achieve that 6%. Let's look at it. Have we had that growth in infrastructure investment, especially in the public sector? It has occurred. The government has spent quite a substantial amount of money on developing the infrastructure, the rail system, the roads. We know, we are a witness to that it has occurred and it's still occurring. Employment growth rates, unfortunately, this one has lagged behind economic growth. We have had a positive economic growth of about since 1996, from 1.5 up to the highest that we've achieved was 3.3%. We were successful in the economic growth, but employment has lagged behind. The reason was the real wage increases are higher than the productivity, simply because our productivity have not really come to the party. The second economic strategy helped, which is this one here, ASGISA. It helped slightly to reduce unemployment through expanded public works program. We know people have managed to get temporary relief on this expanded public works program, but they were not really permanent jobs, they were temporary jobs. And then there was also poor economic growth and high unemployment for the youth. So ASGISA did not really help to remedy some of the concerns. Unemployment amongst the youth, economic growth, we've not really achieved that much. And then there was GIPSA that came in. GIPSA stands for Joint Initiative on Priority Skills and Acquisition. There was also a realization that the unemployment that we're experiencing in the country was due to the lack of skills. And then hence this strategy was adopted, GIPSA. It is the skills development arm of ASGISA. This one focuses on skills development, especially through the SETAs. We know about 25 or 26 SETAs were created in order to transfer skills to people who needed skills, in order to increase their chances of being employed. And we know that this has not really gone well, because a lot of who have gone through these SETAs, they are not employed as we speak. Then we've got Expanded Public Works Program, EPWP. It is a nationwide government intervention to create employment using labor-intensive methods and to give people the skills they can use to find jobs when their work in EPWP is done. That's what EPWP is. It's short term. So when the project is finished, people who were working in this EPWP will have to find other sources of employment, alternative employment. And then we have the National Growth Path, NGP. NGP. Let's quickly look at that. NGP. The aim is to enhance growth, to create employment, and to create greater equity, because we still have a challenge of unequal distribution of income or uneven distribution of wealth and income. So the strategy is to identify the key sectors that can be job drivers, and to promote and support such industries and sectors so that they can operate optimally and create jobs. Right. The focus of this National Growth Path was to create about 5 million jobs by the year 2020, reducing unemployment from 25% to 15%. I would say it's an ambition that the government has with this one. But when we look at what is happening in the economy, the government wanted to create about, I think, 1 million jobs a year. But instead of creating 1 million jobs a year, we are losing almost 1 million jobs a year. The economy is shedding about 1 million jobs a year. And one of the ambitions of the government is to reduce unemployment from 25% to 15%. That is a hurdle to cross also. And then recently we have the National Development Plan, which was on the question paper last year, the National Development Plan. Now, the National Development Plan, it sets out to expand economic opportunities through investment in infrastructure, more innovation, private investment, and entrepreneurship. This National Development Plan is the one that was adopted by the South African government, I think, a few years ago. It was created by the former minister in the presidency, Mr. Trevor Manuel, as the chairperson of that planning commission, and the current deputy president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, was his deputy. They came up with this National Development Plan. The aim of this National Development Plan is to eliminate poverty and to reduce inequality by the year 2030. Some of the goals of the plan, like I've already indicated, is to reduce poverty, is to achieve economic growth, or to grow an inclusive economy, and also to build capabilities, also to to see economic transformation by enhancing the capability of the state and the leaders working together to solve complex problems. Those are some of the goals of the NDP. Also to create jobs or to reduce unemployment to about 14% in the year 2020 and to about 6% in the year 2030. So the National Development Plan has been fine-tuned. It's a combination of all the other plans that were planned for the country that had very ambitious plans, but this one has got more realistic plans. I know one of the aims there is to reduce the Gini ratio of South Africa from 60 to 0.65 to about 0.3, which is also attainable. And then we've got small business development promotion. This is also one of the plans of the strategies to develop the economy. It was designed to deliver support and services to small, medium, and micro enterprises. It is driven by the Department of Trade and Industry, as well as the IDC. It's also a player there. The laws have been revised to help change imbalances. And then you have your Black Economic Empowerment Program, the BEE, which has now been changed to become broad-based Black Economic Empowerment. It is still about the empowerment of black people to assist them in the transformation and redress of the previously disadvantaged groups. It allows them to have a stake in the shareholding of major corporations, so that ultimately the aim is for them to dominate the participation in the economy, so that they can have economic freedom. And measures are implemented also to ensure redress, as well as affirmative action is still in place. I don't know until when, but those are some of the plans that helps us to develop our economy by bringing in people who were previously excluded. Now let's look at to end off our presentation. Let's look at our North and South divide. North and South divide. It's the difference between the countries in the north and countries in the south. Now, they have been summarized very nicely in this table. You've got countries in the north and countries in the south. Countries in the north mostly are those countries that are developed, and countries in the south are those countries that are still developing. Now, let's look at the standard of living first as the first indicator. In the north, the standard of living as measured by the real GDP per capita is high in the north, and in the south is low. And then the second indicator of standard of living is the life expectancy. Life expectancy in the north, it's about 75 years of age, which means people in the European countries, in America, they live up to 75 years or more. And in the south or developing countries, these are countries that are known as most of African countries and North and South American countries. They fall in this category of developing countries, or in the south, in the southern hemisphere. The word south and north, it just shows the location of these countries. North, it means they are in the northern hemisphere. South, they are in the southern hemisphere. They are divided by the equator between them. So the life expectancy of the south countries is 48. They are expected to live up to 48. The education level, still under standard of living. The literacy level, it's very high in the north and very low in the south. Now let's look at globalization as another indicator. Globalization inequalities. The poverty level in the north is low, in the south it's high. The economic growth in the north is high, in the south is low. The production and trade, where we look at manufacturing of goods, the south focus on the manufacturing of goods. The north, they focus on extraction of raw materials. And the north also receive subsidies on their agricultural activity. The farmers there, they receive huge subsidies. But in the south, the agriculture and mining, they are without subsidies. So they create an unfair competition between businesses from the two countries, North and South. And then the environment. Let's look at environment, that's where we look at mass production and consumption damages the ozone layer caused by pollution and toxic waste. As far as the North is concerned, countries in the North, the rich countries or the first world countries, developed countries, they are mainly responsible for damaging the ozone layer. And then the developing countries affects developing countries. Whatever the developed countries do affects the developing countries negatively, because businesses in these developing countries are businesses that are owned by businesses in the developed countries. So whatever they do here, they don't care about the conservation as well as the preservation of the environment. That's why developing countries are affected by what developing countries are doing. And then sustainable development. We're looking at a pattern of development that permits future generation to live as well as the current generation. The practices used in the production are more in favor of sustainable development by the developed countries. And then in the developing countries, production practices do not necessarily promote sustainable development. It is only now that countries in the South are taking steps to promote sustainable development and becoming part of the global organization to promote that. So this is the end of our presentation this morning. It is my hope that you have gained quite a lot from this presentation about economic growth and development, and I believe that now you are now more equipped to grapple with the question paper, whether it's a supplementary or it's a mid-year examination question paper. With this kind of presentation, you have got now the ammunition and the necessary tools to become victorious on that paper. So I wish you everything of the best. Work hard, and then you will reap the benefits. Because if you sow good fruits, you will bear good fruits. See you next time. Thank you.